a third time in U.S. history. I'm sorry if I repeat myself, but there aren't a lot of news events that you can describe in those terms. This is the ultimate sanction that Congress, that the House of Representatives is given the sole power to apply to a president. And it has only happened 3 times. I spent some time today for my column just looking back at those prior impeachments, Andrew Johnson, Bill Clinton. Both of those in their day were controversial, seen as partisan, yet neither has been erased. Neither will ever be erased. So this is the definition of history. When school children learn about the Constitution 100 years from now, and learn how it works, and the checks and balances and the 3 branches of government, they'll learn about the Donald Trump impeachment, however it comes out.
I wonder about that because, we think about how we evolve as a country, what we decide we want to put on a pedestal, what merits a statue or a holiday. We've had debates in this country about what statue should come down.
Yeah.
There were a lot of people that opposed making a Martin Luther King holiday precisely because they feared, I think, one of the positive developments in American life, that we do try to raise boys and girls now to look at Martin Luther King, not as a mixed story, not as a mixed bag, but an unmitigated, complete American hero. So it is with the negative. Johnson and Clinton, who both did get through their impeachments alive, history focuses on their mistakes regardless. Clinton impeached over mistakes. The question whether it was abuse of power was litigated. Johnson narrowly beat it, but boy, history has not been kind because it refocuses the fact that while he wasn't uniquely racist, we had a lot of racists, he was credibly accused of abusing his power in pursuit of the Confederacy and racism. Speak to us about what it means to have a marker of these presidential mistakes.
No, I think it means a lot because of the reason you just laid out so well. It focuses attention on what they did wrong, what they did to merit this ultimate sanction. Now, Andrew Johnson, impeachment or not, I would argue would still be on the bottom of the list of presidents or near the bottom of the list of presidents because now, there are people who supported what he was doing at the time, but he was essentially trying to reverse the Civil War and he was a terrible racist. So was James Buchanan. So was Woodrow Wilson, for that matter, was a racist, which does raise another point. History reassesses presidents. It reassesses everybody. We put up monuments to the people we admire, and monuments should be erected to the people we admire now. And so we look back at someone like Martin Luther King, and we say he was a great man. Well, there was a lot of controversy about him. Not everyone. There was much less agreement about him in real time. Bill Clinton. I could make an argument that Bill Clinton, aside from that messy impeachment thing, was a really good president. Other people might disagree, but we always have to look at the impeachment, look at what caused it. That makes us look at his character flaws, and it keeps us from giving him that sort of unreserved embrace that we give to some figures.
Well, hey, I'm Ari Melber from MSNBC. You can see more of our videos right here, or better yet, subscribe to our YouTube channel below. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us, and we appreciate that.